And welcome back to the Ramp Up to Retirement podcast with your host, Dan Reese. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. Good to see you.
It's great to see you, and I am really excited because those of you who are subscribers to this podcast know that this is the final episode in a series that Dan has been doing about planning in terms of exiting your business, selling your business. And today is the number one theme I have heard over and over again, not just from Dan, but from other analysts and other people who work with business owners. You sold your business. Congratulations. What are you going to do now? So Dan, walk us through the big, really big question that's been sitting in the room the whole time. What comes next?
Yeah, like I think of that when we were younger, like, tell her what he won, Johnny, or what she won, Johnny. You know, that whole thing when on the game show.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, like, at this point through the process, you've done it. You've successfully exited your business, right? Well, here's a little known fact that I think that you were just referencing. Roughly 70% of people that sell their businesses a year later regret it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about that.
That's incredible, isn't it? That's really incredible.
I mean, 7 out of 10 roughly regret it. And so that's what this episode's about. This is really about helping you understand why that is, and then what can you do to better prepare yourself, which we actually have talked about some of them in prior episodes in this series, but we're going to get into it in more detail today because there's a huge shift, right? From selling that business and running that business to now, oh, what do I do?
Well, you know what? Anybody who's ever retired could probably understand that, because I know a lot of people who are retired who suddenly woke up, well, that was a bad idea. I don't know what I do next. So what is it from your experience that surprises business owners the most when they sell?
Well, the first thing is just emotionally, like if you've been running a business, like you're used to being in it. You know what I mean? In it, like you're like, people are asking you questions, you're making decisions. There's like a lot of responsibility and people look up to you. And so you know, from that standpoint, that is a huge transition to walk out. And then now you're home and your dog's not asking you many questions except, can I go for a walk?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And you know, you don't have all that coming at you. And it can be a big hit to the ego, to be honest with you. Like that's a huge thing. And we had a whole episode specifically on personal planning. And I cannot emphasize how important personal planning is, you know, within your life, to understand as you exit, you've got something you're exiting to, not exiting from. That's one of the best terms I heard at the Exit Planning Institute conference this year. There's the gentleman that does exit planning, and he made that very clear. You better be exiting to something. And I think that's really important, because sitting around on your phone all day gets old in a hurry, right?
I had a friend of mine say you can only play so many rounds of golf. I didn't realize that.
100%. The other thing that is a huge change is that when you own a business, you're in control of the biggest part of your wealth, right? Your day-to-day, you're in charge. Here's the thing though, you don't really know like day-to-day what it's worth. You know, and you're controlling it. You feel like you probably don't have as much control as you think you do, but because there's a lot of things that can affect your business,
Yeah.
But you feel like you're in total control. Now, all of a sudden, all that wealth has been monetized, and it's going to typically be in more traditional investments, right? And so as we talk about this today, you've got this whole issue with, okay, now I see my wealth every day and it's going to fluctuate. And all of a sudden, this overwhelming fear can come about of losing your wealth because you're not controlling it anymore, right? And so all of a sudden you feel like, oh boy, man, there's a down market. I got to do something. And it can be very, very stressful. So when you put it all together, you know, you have to understand this emotional change, this change of how your wealth is viewed and how it is controlled in your own eyes. It all plays together and can create a lot of angst. And you see why the 70% number exists in a lot of ways.
It's completely understandable, actually. And so why don't we go through some of the changes financially that occur after you've sold your business, after, if you want to call it this way, the liquidity event. You know, you got a lot of money sitting in your hands.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this big change from operator to investor, right? And most people that own businesses have had some investments, but to be honest, typically it's been a small percentage of their overall wealth. And so they could kind of let it go in a way. They're kind of like, oh, it's fine. It's no big deal. Ups and downs. Hey, I'm running my business. I get it. I know this. But it changes dramatically because the thing is, if you look at, I'm a certified financial planner. I've done this for years and I've helped people manage their wealth through all of retirement. And I know what works and what doesn't work. And here's the little dirty little secret. What works is boring. What works is like structure and discipline and creating good tax plans and good income plans and all these things. Markets work. It's people that don't. And so what gets people into trouble is that when you've been running a business and you've had that adrenaline rush and all those other things, there's this huge kind of disconnect with how you've run your life and now how you need to run your wealth. In the reality is the best thing to do is get a really good fiduciary advisor, preferably a CFP, certified financial planner, that you can trust and let go of it. Not that you don't need to know what's going on and why you're doing what you're doing, but you need to get out of the game a little bit and focus on other things because, like I say, it doesn't match up with how you run your company and how you've built your wealth. Successful wealth management retirement is much, much different than running a company and trying to build it as much as you can and be as profitable as you can.
So that brings us to a really key point, which I'm going to underline it, if you will. There are very different skills between building a business and preserving your wealth.
Oh, yes. That is 100% accurate. So you think about it, when you build a business, you're very concentrated in what you do, right? And that's what makes you great. Because if you've seen these companies, well, remember GE a few years ago got super broad and they owned all these different things. They were in long-term care, and I think they might have been in aerospace. I mean, they were in so many different things.
They were like the diversified of diversified companies.
And what happened to their profitability? It went down, right? Because good companies are laser focused on what they do and they get really, really good at it. And they can be very aggressive because when you build that and you build a company that's outstanding at whatever it is you do, you can be aggressive marketing because you've got a lot of value to share, right? Well, once you sell the company, what is good investments? Diversified, right? We want to spread our money out. Don't have all our eggs in one basket. You've heard all the sayings, right? There's got to be good structure. There has to be a good process for what investments you own to make sure it's based on true objective information and not a bunch of emotion, right? And what it does is like that emotional investing, which we want to stay away from, which goes in line with running your business. That's why your personality was such a good fit for it. Just there's a huge conflict. You know what I mean? It's just like butting heads because you're out there like still trying to run things that way. And you're like, hey, I just saw the news. This company's coming up. They're going to be huge. And I want to put a bunch of money in it because I think it's going to do it 10 times in the next few years. That kind of idea, which again, might have been really good when you ran your business. But when you're trying to preserve your wealth, could that happen? Possibly. But more chances than not, it won't happen. And you will have wasted money on something that ended up being, just going down a bad road.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of owners, you made this point just a little bit ago, don't really have a lot of investments outside their company. And what they don't think about, but they kind of know subconsciously, is that their biggest investments, their business, and that business is illiquid until they sell it. And now they've manifested the wealth of the company. They have it sitting there, and you're right. For most of these people, not all of them, and not everybody, but for most of them, probably the time has come for them to be really boring. I like the way you put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, boring's good. I mean, here's the other thing too that I want to mention about it. It's really important, and this is just a general financial planning principle. So to understand what return do I even need to get to be able to do everything I want to do? Does that kind of make sense? So I've got this much money. I need this much money a year to live the way I want to live. what kind of return do I need to get to make sure that happens for as long as I live? Right.
Yeah.
And so that can help put it in perspective. Let's say you only need a 5% return to do everything you want, never have to worry about anything. Like, why not position things in a way that you know you can get that over time and then eliminate worries, right? When you start playing these gambling games, what I call them, because of, that personality of wanting to win and wanting to be, competitive, oftentimes it's just self-defeating because it gets you no further along, even if they worked out. Like, you know what I mean? You've got more money than you had before, but it doesn't change anything in your life. Outside, you can brag to the guys at your, golf club that, oh, you should see what I did, and I know I golf, and I know that's conversation a lot. People like to talk about their wins on stock picking. No one ever talks about their losses, and I don't know why. I guess they must be all winners, right? So
They're all winners, buddy. Yeah, they're all winners. One of the things you haven't talked about here, Dan, and I know you've got it in your book to talk about is taxes.
yes.
Because they too change dramatically after you have sold your business and you're on your own, as it were.
Yeah. And we mentioned this in our last episode. The tax planning piece really needs to start well before you sell your company, because there are a lot of programs out there can help you mitigate some of those taxes if you are proactive, right?
Yeah.
And so understanding that and having a really good team, and like part of my job as a certified financial planner is to put together or help people construct really good teams. When you think of like good CPAs that have done exits, right, that understand how it all works, good attorneys and business attorneys that structure the deals right. But what you have to understand on the tax side of it is that you can do more than you probably think you can do to reduce those.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that it's not just, what you sell something for, it's what your net amount is after you pay those taxes. And that's part of the job of your certified financial planner too, to make sure we understand going in. If you sell the company for X number of dollars, you've got this tax liability and other expenses. Is the net amount, does that net amount give you what you need? Does that fill what's called your wealth gap to make sure you can continue to live the way you want, which we talked about in a prior episode as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there's capital gains management, right? That's a huge issue. A lot of companies, when they're sold, have capital gains, you realize. So understanding the tax laws around that. Like I always tell people many times, if you're going to have a liquidity event, it's advantageous to have it early in the year so that you've got all year to do some strategies, to try to offset some of those taxes by the end of the year. If you do it right at the end of the year, because we live in a January to December tax world on the personal side, you sometimes don't have the options you might have otherwise, right? So just understand it's a real issue. And it's not just during your transition, it's also after the fact, because business sales means you're going to have a lot of after-tax dollars, non-retirement account dollars, right? And those have different tax characteristics than an IRA does. So really, you got to be aware of all that.
Yeah, I would imagine that, there's a ton of things I can imagine that you need to be aware of. And when you plan, you create the opportunity to prepare. What about like estate planning? That probably changes rather dramatically.
It's a huge change. Like really, as you transition out, you need to redo really your whole estate plan, because where before your biggest asset was in the business, now it's on the personal side. So that's going to change things dramatically. And the other thing is, depending on what you sold your business for, you might have some estate taxes to like consider. You could be above the limits and things like that, depending on what you sold your company for. And so you need to start laying that out to put yourself in the best long-term position. It becomes a bigger issue with transferring wealth to your next generations, whether that's kids or grandkids. Because before you might have been like, well, they're getting some money, but it's not like life-changing. Now it could be life-changing, and your whole perspective might change on how you want to deliver that to them. It might be like, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to give it all at once. They're going to have limitations on withdrawals. There could be all kinds of things, right? Part of your wealth or your estate plan also is your charitable plan, right? And so when you think about, hey, I've got more money than I ever thought I might have, there could be charities that all of a sudden you're like, I never thought we could do X. I never thought we could sport this to that level, and now we can. and maybe even like charitable trusts where you can do things long term, that can go into the next generation. That's all part of that, right? And by the way, I will tell you that part of it should really be explored before the sale. Because again, there's some things you may be able to do that are advantageous from a tax perspective with some of that money, during the sale or as you're closing on that. So like the charitable planning is huge. Family wealth transfer is huge, how you want to do that. And also asset protection strategies, because all of a sudden you got a lot more to lose. And so understanding how can I position my wealth depending on where you live, because the state you live in is going to govern a lot of those things, right? And so in certain states, you've got a lot more estate taxes. You have more threats from lawsuits than other states. Just depends where you live. And so really going through all those things, and it all works together, the tax, the charitable, how it passes to next generations. And it takes a lot of soul searching to really make sure you get that in a way that's going to accomplish your goals and also put you in the best long-term position. I do want to comment one thing, Bill, about that. We've talked at length about the process of value acceleration, which is, our exit planning. We call it value acceleration. These things should really be talked about way back before you sell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, you have made that point. For those who have not listened to the other parts of the series, this is probably a theme that runs through everything, as a matter of fact.
Yes. Yeah. And it really, because the thing is, when you think about, as you're working through the process, you're going to start to understand the value of your company. And as you understand the value of your company, you're going to start to understand how much of that value do I need just to maintain my lifestyle? And if there's extra value, what am I going to do with that, right? How am I going to handle that? And then you can also start to see, based on, the probable amount, how is that going to play out through the next several years in my retirement as it grows? So all of a sudden, what you have when you retire is likely going to be quite a bit more by the time you pass away. And just understanding all that stuff and like how it all plays together. Because I will tell you, and I've had a lot of clients that have experienced this. They'll look at what they have today and they're kind of like, yeah, that's nice. My kids are getting a nice amount. And then they fast forward based on our plan to when they're 85 or 90. And the look on their face like, holy cow, I don't know if I want my kids to get that much money. I mean, for real, that's like a real thing.
Makes a lot of sense. One of the things that also make a lot of sense is that, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, is the legacy word. Legacy businesses are, in many, many ways, the legacy of the owner or the family that has run the business. So what do successful owners think about legacy when they start looking at it and giving it consideration?
I think that a lot of business owners take a lot of pride, most of them, in what they built, and they should. I mean, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of sacrifice, it's a lot of risk taking to build what they built, and a lot of them feel a lot of pride in it. And so, number one, they want that to continue if possible in the business, right? But from an exiting standpoint, the next thing that comes about is, how do you manage that in a way that continues to fulfill your own values and also allows you to have a way to pass that down through your kids, grandkids, family, right? So like we call a lot of that, there's like family governance, things like that. So really what family governance is, I will say this, like most people that are set to possibly inherit substantial money created from this business sale are not ready for that. They're not ready for it for a lot of reasons, right? But it can be overwhelming. And so like if you understand it ahead of time and you can start building out like regular family meetings, talking about it, talking about philanthropy, talking about all these things. And so money becomes more of a positive tool than a burden. And, Dave Ramsey has a great saying. I think he uses the example of a brick. A brick can be good or bad. A brick can be used to build wonderful things, or it could also be used to throw through someone's front window, right? And, it's kind of like that's a good analogy because this wealth you've created, you need to take that responsibility seriously if you truly want, you know, a positive long-term outcome. None of us are going to live forever, right? And you can do amazing things like with, again, back to charitable like foundations, all these different things that you may be able to like bring your family in. You work together on, you make decisions together. You start to, you kind of indoctrinate them over time of the importance of using this money wisely. And at the same time, educating them on how hard you worked and the sacrifices that were made to create it. And so, that whole idea can help you continue to grow positively. I mean, even you think about like if you have the right amount of liquidity, being able to support your next generations for them to start businesses that can impact the world,
Yes.
right? And that's part of that family governance, like creating documents like, hey, we're going to have this almost family trust where this part of this is going to support entrepreneurism down the road, and there's a good way to do that. It's not just like, oh, Joe's going to try this. No. It's like, all right, let's, well thought out business plan, making sure it's legitimate and all those things. But that's actually should be very fun. You know what I mean? Like you're out of, and that can also help you transfer from running the business every day to having something new that you can start to kind of, dig into and give you some real value in your life. Because you're like, hey, we're gonna really help our next generation just leverage this gift that we've received in a positive way.
Part of all of this in terms of selling the business and having family governance and teaching, financial stewardship and imparting values about philanthropy are all really, really important. But also is the idea that it's like, how much money it is, whether it's, it doesn't matter the amount. How do you kind of protect that wealth from eroding, or can you even do that over generations? Is that part of the process you were just talking about?
Yeah, I think that if you don't have good family governance and really talk and communicate and really teach them, I think it's very difficult for it not to erode. Because, the further you get away from the core, the further circles of generations and all these other things, it's just, the message probably dissipates. It gets, you know what I mean? It's just not as strong. And so I think you can make improvements, but that's really what comes down to kind of my thing about supporting future entrepreneurs, because you want them to, like, your business probably made a good impact on the world. You employed people, you know what I mean? You changed lives. And so the best way to continue your legacy is to create an environment where maybe other people in your family can do the same thing and maybe create more than you ever even imagined, right? Because they've got a little bit of a head start because they have some financial backing up front to be able to get started on that great idea. But yeah, I do think it's difficult because, as generations change, people's perspectives change and it becomes just money. You know what I mean? And as opposed to a tool, that's just some money I got from grandpa or great grandpa or whoever it might have been.
Whoever it was. So wrap this episode up and this series up for us here with a set of action steps that people can do and take.
Yeah. So first of all, just to wrap up this concept and then kind of to go through the whole series. First of all, you got to build a post-sale investment framework. Like you cannot wing it. Like you need to have good structure, good, a reason for how everything's set up that supports your income needs, that is tax efficient. That's super important. You need to revisit your estate and tax structures overall, how you've got everything set up. You got to really clarify your legacy goals because now that you've monetized the company, you've got to make sure that things are going to happen the way that you would like to see them happen over time, and really working with your family to educate them and to hopefully get them on board with what you're doing so you guys can be a team so that when you pass away, which everyone does, you feel confident they're going to continue to operate in a way that you'd be proud of, right? With everything you worked so hard for. And that's that long-term stewardship plan. And really, It's not just about the exit's about living well afterwards. You know what I mean? It's like exiting to something. That's exactly such a great way to think of it. And when you think of this stuff overall, like as we've talked through this thing, exit planning truly should be value acceleration. The whole point is to focus on the three legs of the stool, which is personal planning, making sure that you've got a plan that you're exiting to, personal financial planning, make sure your finances are going to support that. In business planning, making sure that you're doing everything you can to consistently improve both the value of your company and the, how marketable it is to sell, so that you can consistently work through this over time, so that when you decide it's a good time to exit, or maybe it's a time that you didn't really want to, but you need to, you've got options. You're going to get a fair value for that company. Because that's really what this comes down to. There's so many great ways to attack it. We have a very defined structure we believe in on how to do it that has worked and has been proven through the years. But just you gotta step in and do it. You know what I mean? Like, you can talk about this stuff all day long. Like, you got to take the first steps, and you got to do what we call it a triggering event, which is honestly like, let's find out where you sit today. What is the value of your company? What is your wealth gap? Understanding these things. And then, start figuring out the action steps to start making constant improvement. And when you do those things, it allows you to really focus in on some of these other things we're talking about that are so important outside of just money. And it really just improves your overall quality of life.
Yeah, that well said. I think of these things. I think of lives in terms of chapters. And everybody's read a book, everybody's read something, even if it's online, and they understand that, each chapter is a different purpose and has a different goal and takes you to a different place. And this whole 8-part series that you've been talking about planning for your exit on your business, for that event that comes next, for that chapter that comes next. If you follow what you've been talking about in this process, the goal here is to create a really good, meaningful next chapter, one that you like being in the middle of, one that you want. And I really like the way you really underscore it. Yeah, it's about the money, but it's not really about the money. Nobody ever died happy just because they accumulated a whole bunch of money.
Right.
Because you can't take it with you just to steal a line from somewhere else.
No, you're right. Life's about, honestly, we all have to have funds to live our lives, but life's about relationships. Life's about impacting others. The happiest people are the ones that have good relationships and are doing something in the world that impacts people positively. There's no question.
There is none at all. For those of you who have been listening to this series, if you want to give Dan a call, I'm going to remind you again, do so. And Dan, tell them how they can get a hold of you and what they can expect.
Yeah, just go out to our website, averywealth.com. We've got all our contact information, a lot of great resources. I do have a book that the head of the Exit Planning Institute had written about this whole process, and it puts it into nice, like back to chapters, right? So it's a really, really good reference. So if you want a copy of that, just reach out. I'm happy to send you one over. The book's great. Like it really is. And it kind of puts into perspective some case studies, if you will, on how these things work out. But I'm happy to talk to you and answer any questions you have and get you started on this journey. We can get you set up to like experience your own triggering event, to say, hey, where am I today? Let's get some numbers on paper and let's see if we can start our journey to really accelerate the value of our company and improve our overall lives.
Absolutely. So if you haven't reached out and spoken with Dan ever, do so. It's not something you will regret. Whether you have a relationship, whether you decide you want to make a relationship with Dan, just simply give him a call and have that conversation. Good things might come from that, as a matter of fact. Another good thing that can happen is if you're not a subscriber to the podcast, hit follow, become a subscriber, because then every time Dan drops a new episode, it goes into your inbox and you can give that one a listen. So until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Dan and everybody at Avery Wealth, thank you for taking the time to listen, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Ramp Up Your Retirement. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.averywealth.com or give us a call at 517-783-1695. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Avery Wealth. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The opinions voiced in Ramp Up to Retirement with Dan Reese are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on the show may not be affiliated with CWM LLC. Views and comments by guests may not be representative of CWM LLC. Investment advisory services are offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Carson Partners, a division of CWM LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors.